Caitlin Clark has become a name that echoes far beyond basketball. But behind the cheers, the headlines, and the record-breaking moments, there's another story. One that's been quietly unfolding in the shadows. A story about power, influence, and a silent war for control inside the WNBA. At first, it all seemed innocent enough. A few veterans making side comments, a rookie learning to handle the spotlight. Maybe just a little bit of locker room tension. Nothing unusual, right? That's what the official narrative wanted you to believe. But look closer. Those subtle digs in interviews, the cold stares during games, the calculated posts on social media, they weren't random. They were pieces of a larger puzzle. And fans online, acting like detectives, started connecting the dots. What they found was chilling. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about protecting legacies, about influence, about fear. Fear that a 22-year-old rookie was changing the face of the league faster than anyone expected. And that fear sparked one of the boldest, most underestimated power plays in WNBA history. According to insiders, a handful of veterans allegedly tried to launch a quiet rebellion from within the Indiana Fever locker room. Their goal? To slow Caitlin Clark's rise before it completely reshaped the league's balance of power. They believed they could turn one of her own teammates against her, a player with credibility, chemistry, and influence inside the team. But the plan didn't go as expected, because the very player they tried to recruit became the biggest obstacle in their path. The one who exposed the fractures before they could spread. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on the story you weren't supposed to hear. We'll trace how a small group of players allegedly tried to challenge Caitlin Clark's momentum, why they chose the teammate they thought would break her from within, and how that decision backfired in ways no one saw coming. So if you've ever felt that the headlines only showed half the truth, stay with us. Because what we uncovered makes those viral clips and public statements look like just the tip of the iceberg. For months, the official story stayed clean. League spokespeople dismissed the tension as rookie hazing. Media outlets called it healthy competition. It sounded convenient. Too convenient. Every time a veteran's remark went viral, a sly eye roll, a jab about hype, a reminder that rookies still have to earn it, the same defense appeared on cue. It's just tough love, they said. Nothing more. But patterns don't lie. Fans started noticing the timing of certain interviews, the similarity of talking points, even how players in completely different markets seemed to echo the same message. It stopped feeling like coincidence and started to feel like choreography. And that's when the cracks in the official story began to show. Because if all of this was just competitive fire, why did every flame seem to burn in one direction, toward Caitlin Clark? Why did it feel less like random rivalries and more like a coordinated resistance? It all began online, subtle, almost invisible, until fans started connecting the dots. Reddit threads, TikTok deep dives, frame-by-frame breakdowns of press conferences and game footage. Suddenly, what looked like scattered tension began forming a pattern. Something wasn't adding up. There were too many perfectly timed remarks. Too many identical talking points, too many players across different teams echoing the same message. To fans, it didn't feel spontaneous. It felt strategic, like someone, somewhere, was trying to control the story before Caitlin Clark could own it. Of course, the league's response was predictable. You're imagining things. It's just competitive spirit. Rookie hazing. But WNBA fans aren't casual observers. They notice everything. The side glances, the clipped tones, the body language that doesn't match the words. And by late summer, that healthy competition excuse had worn paper thin. There were simply too many coincidences to ignore. That's when fans started asking the real question. If this wasn't random, who stood to gain from slowing down Caitlin Clark's rise? And why, of all teams, was the Indiana Fever caught in the middle? That's where the official story ends, and the unofficial one begins. And it's inside that unofficial story where the real drama and the outlines of a deliberate plan come sharply into focus. Once you start looking beyond the headlines, the pattern becomes impossible to miss. The digs at Caitlin Clark weren't harmless jokes or post-game frustration. According to multiple insider accounts and fan-driven investigations, what we saw was part of a slow, calculated campaign, a quiet strategy to stall her rise before it reshaped the league's balance of power. Here's how the alleged plan worked. They didn't go after her directly. That would have been too obvious, too easy to expose. Instead, they went subtle. A cold shoulder during warm-ups, a passing remark about media darlings, whispers that some players were being overhyped before they'd earned their stripes. The goal wasn't to destroy her reputation overnight. It was to plant doubt, to chip away at her influence from the inside, to make her own teammates question her place, her leadership, her spotlight. And all it would take was one seed of resentment to spread. If even one key player inside the Fever's locker room started feeling sidelined or overlooked, the team's chemistry could begin to fracture. And once that happens, even the most talented player starts to crumble under the weight of isolation. It's an old tactic in professional sports: divide and conquer. Teams aren't always beaten by their rivals on the court. More often, they're broken by what happens behind closed doors. And in this case, the architects of the alleged plan thought they had found their perfect target. From their perspective, it made perfect sense. Take one veteran, loyal, battle-tested, frustrated after years of losing. Then add a rookie who walks in with instant fame, endorsement deals, and headlines calling her the savior of women's basketball. Stir in years of disappointment, and you have the perfect storm for jealousy and resentment. That's why all eyes turned to one person, Kelsey Mitchell. Mitchell wasn't just another name on the roster. For nearly a decade, she was the Indiana Fever, the heart, the voice, the face of a team fighting to stay relevant. A former first-round pick who'd endured season after season of heartbreak, new coaches, rebuilding rosters, and empty promises. Every night, she showed up. She carried the weight of failure, the burden of expectation, and the frustration of watching other franchises rise while hers stayed stuck. She wasn't just a player. She was the glue holding a broken franchise together. So, from a strategic standpoint, she was the perfect candidate. If Kelsey Mitchell even hinted at frustration, if she made one clipped remark about earning it, it could validate everything the veterans around the league had been saying. It would make the narrative feel true without anyone else having to say a word. That was the heart of the plan. Not to silence Caitlin Clark, but to isolate her, to make her feel alone in her own locker room. All they needed was for Kelsey Mitchell to take the bait. But what happened next turned everything upside down. Because the same player they thought they could use, the one they believed would carry their message, ended up being the reason. The entire scheme collapsed before it ever had a chance to succeed. To understand why, you first have to understand the woman behind the jersey. Kelsey Mitchell's story isn't just about basketball. It's about endurance, loyalty, and survival. When she was drafted in 2018, she was supposed to be the spark that reignited the Fever's legacy. But instead, she walked into 6 grueling seasons defined by loss. 6 straight losing records, 5 different head coaches, endless roster changes, and constant pressure to perform when everything else around her was falling apart. Every game, every practice, she played not just for points, but for pride, for the hope that one day the tide would turn. So when Caitlin Clark arrived, Kelsey didn't see a threat. She saw a chance to finally build something worth fighting for. For years, Kelsey Mitchell had spoken about progress and building blocks, even when there was hardly any progress to show. That's the kind of toughness you don't measure in points or rebound. It's the kind that lives behind the stat sheet. Quiet, relentless, unbreakable. Through every losing season, Mitchell became the anchor, the one steady presence who refused to quit, even as the franchise drifted deeper into obscurity. And then came Caitlin Clark. Almost overnight, the story changed. The same team Mitchell had fought to keep relevant suddenly had a new face, a new savior. A rookie who hadn't yet endured the grind that Mitchell had carried for years. Clark was hailed as the spark that would save not just the Fever, but maybe even the WNBA itself. From the outside, it wasn't hard to imagine how that might sting. The player who'd been the heart of the franchise for years now risked being recast as a side character in someone else's story. And that, insiders say, is exactly why the alleged architects of the anti-Clark strategy thought Mitchell would be the perfect opening. They assumed she'd already be feeling overlooked, maybe even a little resentful. In their eyes, she was the credible voice they needed, the veteran who could question the hype and make it sound justified. If she spoke, fans would listen. To them, it was a calculated move that made perfect sense on paper. Kelsey Mitchell wasn't a rookie. She was battle-tested, respected, and established. If she expressed frustration, it wouldn't look like jealousy. It would look like truth. But this was the fatal miscalculation. They thought they knew Kelsey Mitchell, but they didn't. Her years of hardship hadn't hardened her against her team's future. They'd made her protective of it. Instead of resenting Caitlin Clark, Mitchell saw her as the missing piece. The piece she'd been waiting for all along. She wasn't chasing the spotlight. She was building a culture. And the very loyalty that made her seem like the perfect target was the same loyalty that made her immune to the plan. Kelsey Mitchell wasn't waiting to reclaim her place in the story. She was waiting for the right teammate to help her finish it. And when that moment finally came, when she was asked to speak publicly about Caitlin Clark, she didn't deliver the soundbite that architects had been waiting for. She delivered something else entirely. When Kelsey Mitchell finally faced the cameras, the months of quiet maneuvering began to unravel in real time. The veterans and insiders who'd allegedly tried to pull her into their circle were sure they had chosen perfectly. The longest-tenured player on a losing franchise, watching her prime slip away. Surely, resentment was inevitable. All they needed was one question about Caitlin Clark's spotlight, one flicker of frustration, and the dam would break. But the dam never broke. Instead of bitterness, they got composure. Instead of envy, they got grace. Mitchell spoke softly, but her words landed like thunder. She didn't question Clark's hype. She praised it. She called her a force that had changed not just the Fever, but changed the world. Those weren't empty compliments. They were a direct hit at the very core of the campaign that aimed to frame Clark as overhyped. That single choice of words, a veteran calling her rookie, teammate a world changer, shattered the narrative in an instant. Mitchell wasn't just defending Clark, she was redefining what leadership looked like in the modern WNBA. And then came the line that ended the conversation entirely. Looking straight into the cameras, Kelsey Mitchell said that fans and players had better learn to appreciate Caitlin Clark, not as a rival, but as someone who would open doors for the entire league. In that moment, the entire debate collapsed. What had been painted as a clash of egos now looked petty and outdated compared to the unity Mitchell projected. The mistake the architects made ran deeper than underestimating her loyalty. They failed to understand that the WNBA had evolved. The old tactics, pitting veterans against rookies, playing on ego and insecurity, no longer worked in a locker room built on mutual respect. Kelsey Mitchell's show of unity wasn't just a statement, it was a turning point. It told the world that the Fever's core wasn't interested in old-school politics or whispered rivalries. They were here to win together. In trying to recruit Mitchell, the architects revealed the limits of their own power. They believed resentment could still be weaponized, that loyalty could be twisted into bitterness. But instead, they found something they didn't expect. A player whose integrity was stronger than manipulation, and whose leadership had already become something untouchable. The supposed centerpiece of their plan became the person who burned the blueprint on live television. And in doing so, she exposed just how outdated that strategy really was. When Kelsey Mitchell spoke out, she didn't just give an interview, she flipped the script. Her words left fans and insiders asking an uncomfortable question. If someone really was trying to fracture the Fever's chemistry, who was behind it? From here, the story moves from fact into speculation, into whispers, theories, and fan detective work. Let's be clear, no one involved has ever admitted to coordinating anything. There's no secret email, no leaked message, no confession. What we do have are patterns, repeated comments, perfectly timed remarks, and small gestures that felt too synchronized to ignore. And in the public eye, patterns can be just as powerful as proof. Two names surfaced again and again: Aja Wilson, superstar of the Las Vegas Aces, and Cheryl Swoops, a WNBA legend and pioneer. Clips began circulating: podcasts, press conferences, post-game interviews, where both seemed to question the hype around Caitlin Clark, or remind the public that rookies still have to prove themselves. On their own, these comments sounded harmless, normal veteran pride. But the timing of those remarks, often aligning with key moments in the Fever's season, made fans wonder if there was more going on. It started to feel less like coincidence, and more like coordination. Now, to be fair, neither Wilson nor Swoops ever confirmed anything close to a strategy. Most of what's been said comes from online speculation, fans connecting dots that may or may not exist. A raised eyebrow during an interview, a sarcastic laugh in a podcast, a caption that could be read two different ways. The internet does what it always does. It builds a story from fragments. Whether that story is accurate or not, once it takes shape, it's hard to erase. And that's the thing. The theory made emotional sense. Wilson and Swoops weren't outsiders. They were part of the league's foundation. Women who built the WNBA during its hardest years, who played when the cameras weren't rolling and the stands were half empty. They earned every inch of visibility women's basketball has today. So imagine what it must have felt like to see a 22-year-old Hanati Ioannidis 20-year-old rookie arrive and instantly command global attention. Endorsement deals, primetime coverage, and headlines calling her the savior of the league. To some veterans, that wasn't just hype. It felt like history was being rewritten in real time, erasing the years they spent fighting for recognition. That emotional tension, the fear of being forgotten, became the heartbeat of the alleged pushback. Not out of jealousy, but out of defense. A plea to the world. We were here first. We built this. Others saw it differently. They argued there was no secret plan, just a handful of blunt comments magnified by social media until they looked like a conspiracy. And maybe both sides are right, because legacy and change have always collided in sports. Every new star rewrites the rules, and every generation faces the same reckoning, the moment when the torch begins to pass. Whether they're ready or not, Caitlin Clark's arrival wasn't just a big debut. It was a collision of eras, the old guard who fought for survival, and the new guard who entered with fame already at their backs. For the veterans, it was personal. Many of them came into a league that was struggling to stay visible, playing for modest salaries, traveling on buses, and fighting to prove that women's basketball deserved a platform at all. Now, suddenly, a rookie walks in and gets million-dollar deals before even dribbling her first pro ball. To some, that wasn't progress. It was salt in an open wound. But to the new generation, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, and even Kelsey Mitchell, it looked like victory. It was proof that the sacrifices of those before them weren't in vain, that the struggle worked. To them, visibility wasn't a threat. It was a rising tide lifting everyone. And that's where the heart of the clash lived. Legacy versus momentum. The veterans wanted their history honored. The newcomers wanted to write the next chapter. Both were fighting for the same cause, the league's soul, but from opposite sides of time. Nowhere did this conflict play out more vividly than inside the Indiana Fever locker room, where the two worlds shared the same space. Kelsey Mitchell became the bridge, the voice that proved both sides could coexist. Instead of letting tension tear them apart, the Fever chose unity. They built chemistry where others expected division. Mitchell, Clark, Boston, and Hull forged a new culture built on mutual respect and shared purpose. And while critics outside the team kept stoking the fire, the Fever were quietly becoming the blueprint for what the future of the WNBA could look like. Because here's the irony. While some veterans were trying to protect the past, The future was already taking shape in Indiana. Change doesn't wait for permission. And, in this case, it arrived with a smile, a three-pointer, and a rookie who wasn't afraid to carry the weight of a league on her shoulder. The plan was doomed from the start. It was built on an old assumption that ego and jealousy still ruled locker rooms the way they did a decade ago, that if you poked at pride long enough, cracks would form, grudges would surface, and the chemistry would collapse from within. But that's not what they found in Indiana. What they ran into instead was something they hadn't prepared for: real unity. The Fever's core didn't see each other as competitors fighting for space. They saw themselves as parts of a larger whole, each player a piece of something bigger. And at the center of it stood Kelsey Mitchell, her open defense of Caitlin Clark. Live on camera wasn't just an interview. It was a statement, a shield. It was as if she drew a line in the sand and said, "Whatever story you're trying to write about us, it ends here." Whoever tried to divide the Fever underestimated one thing: chemistry. This isn't the WNBA of 10 years ago. Back then, players fought for individual spotlight. Now, they're building something bigger, together. With booming ticket sales, major sponsors, and growing fan bases, everyone knows Caitlin Clark's rise isn't taking away. It's adding more for all. As Kelsey Mitchell joked, "We're not speaking broke anymore." It was playful, but it spoke volumes. Because today, the real battle isn't between teammates. It's between the league's past limits and its future potential. The old tactic, whispers, shade, rivalry, don't work anymore. What was meant to divide the Fever only made them stronger. Mitchell's decision to stand with Clark turned tension into unity. It sent a message: the future belongs to those who build, not those who tear down. The veterans deserve respect for laying the foundation, but the new generation deserves the freedom to lead without apology. Progress doesn't erase the past, it expands on it. So, what do you think? Was this a changing of the guard, or proof that the WNBA's past and future can grow together? Because the real stories in sports aren't written in headlines. They're shaped in the quiet moments that change everything.